I think we should do that. I believe it's the right decision. I guess this should be what we do. Maybe you heard these phrases before, and most likely you, in certain situations, thought, I'm not too convinced if you know what you're doing right here. And that's exactly what we're talking about today. When it comes to decision making, facts versus beliefs is a huge issue, especially when you work as a leader. And we had recent examples where beliefs, and I'm not talking about religion, just to make that clear here. This is not a religious podcast, and I'm not talking about religion in this episode today. We talk about facts versus beliefs when leaders make a decision. And just recently, we had cases where beliefs were the leading reason why people made a very bad decision. And some of you might have heard of it. FTX, the second largest cryptocurrency trading platform, crashed. And they now held all withdrawals. So at the moment, many people are waiting for their money. Certain entities were able to pay out. So for example, some in Europe or the Japanese one. However, the one in the US and the Bahamas and others are unable to pay out the amount of money. And now Sam Bankman-Fried, the former CEO of that FTX cryptocurrency trading platform, most likely will be extradited to the US. He just recently was arrested in the Bahamas. We now have to see how do bad decisions in organization happen? Because let's face it, there were enough signs before that FTX is in trouble. Many people before exposed certain amounts of data and certain reasoning, and these reasonings are of course dangerous, because when you talk down on a certain trading platform, you can be sued for libelous remarks, or they can claim that you want to hurt or damage their platform. However, many people said, here's an issue, here's an issue, here's an issue, facts are here, here, and here, and still people believed it's going to be okay. And just to let you know, at the moment, it looks like that the largest cryptocurrency trading platform will purchase, not sure if they bail out, but they most likely will purchase the second largest one. When you're on the consumer side, when the largest one buys the second largest one, it normally doesn't end with lower fees or anything similar. So you have to see, how much trust do you still have? And are you making your decision based on beliefs or based on facts? We now have to see, how does that happen? And by the way, at the moment, of course, you can still claim in the crypto market, there's no regulation, which is not entirely true. We have certain regulations in Switzerland. We have Crypto Valley, which is tremendously successful. It also has an economic value to the country. Germany, again, made horrible regulations and, of course, made it very difficult for cryptocurrency to anything in business. Another step of the, meanwhile, commonly known country of Germany that was leading, but now is not leading that much anymore when it comes to technical innovations in certain sectors. Very sad, as I am German, as you know. So when there's regulatory compliance and now regulatories are coming in the UK, quite unusual that the UK will be leading on that, but in this case they will. We have to see, why do people believe instead of looking at facts? Because when you see it, now we have to look into how to do it better. When you see that leaders make a decision based on beliefs, not based on facts, you wonder why. Because they will have an interest to not damage their organization, to not damage their company, to not damage their own career. But often when you talk about, let's talk about the evidence, let's talk about the facts, they say, oh, it takes too long, it's too much effort to get them all together, or they simply do not want to talk about the facts because it might hurt or it might harm one of their positions they hold based on, here we go again, beliefs. And quite a number of belief methods are out there, even in the training, or I don't want to call it knowledge world, but in the training world out there, when you talk to people and you hear they do NLP, which has no evidence whatsoever, still people do NLP and they believe that everything now works based on NLP, and surprise, it doesn't. Or suddenly you have companies that send leaders to have a training with horses. Professor Cunning from the University of Applied Sciences in Osnabrück in Germany did research on that. You cannot learn leadership from horses. There's scientific evidence. Still, certain companies send their leaders to make a leadership experience or learning experience with horses. Zero evidence. Then, of course, you have the whole bunch of people who talk about the law of attraction. When you do something, you attract the consequences. That, as a statement on itself, is straightforward wrong. And it's very easy to debunk, by the way, because, of course, you can say, when I do something, it has consequences. No one says that it doesn't. But when something bad happens to you and someone says you attracted it somehow by your actions, that is deeply rooted in the victim blaming ideology. And victim blaming, of course, keeps people who are on stages selling you motivational, inspirational, whatever goal-setting workshop nonsense. They, of course, are not accountable anymore as soon as they tell you that you are responsible and accountable for everything. The law of attraction can easily be debunked. When someone tells you, oh, everyone attracts this, everyone is responsible and accountable for their own happenings, etc., just ask them 3 questions. So question number 1, do you think that the Jewish community attracted the Holocaust? They normally come up with a certain excuse and they say, oh, we don't like extremes. Well, you don't have to like it. Science doesn't care about if you like. You have to answer the question, and they can't. They can't answer the question. Question number 2. So first, I just told you to ask them if they think that the Jewish community attracted the Holocaust. Question number 2, do you think that the people in the World Trade Center during the terror attacks in 2001, do you think they attracted these planes? And again, they will not be able to answer that. And question number 3 is, and that is something which I will not recommend you to do, but you could do the following. You just take a glass of water, you pour it straight into their face, and you say, so what have you done wrong that you now attracted this glass of water in your face? Because it's clearly their fault, isn't it? And of course, they can't answer that either. So you see, science very quickly can dissolve all of these myths. But when you look at the whole esoterical scene, when people say, and of course we have them deeply rooted in the so-called motivational, inspirational speaking industry, it's a pathetic bunch of people who desperately want to make money while having very little skills, but only claim about making you feel better and giving you a pseudo influence on your life you do not have. So when people say we meditate together to raise the frequency of the world, to end the war in Ukraine, that is unacceptable on an unbelievable amount of levels. These people are not only putting their ego first based on a war scenario, which was started by Russia invading Ukraine. They also try to make money off that by offering events where you have to sit somewhere and then you meditate together and you think you're ending the war in Ukraine. Surprise, they didn't, as we see here. So now we have to look into how to do it better before I get too angry about this. How to do it better. So step number 1. So first, you always start with look at the facts. But of course, immediately raise the question, when is something a fact? And when something is in the news, is it a fact? And obviously it can be, but it doesn't have to be. We just recently, again, had another scandal with a German newspaper, Der Spiegel, who published that there had been dead people at a certain border, and then turned out there were no dead refugees at that border. And then they had to admit that they just took a piece of information, didn't fact check it, didn't filter it, didn't do anything with it, just publish it, and it was wrong. Once again, they had these scandals before, the Lozio scandal, etc., etc. This paper now had a Presserüge, which is the worst warning you can get as a press media. They are known for that. Meanwhile, we have to look into what we're talking about reliable and valid and reliable data. But of course, now the question is, what does that mean? What is reliable data? What is valid data? So first, if you believe it is correct or not, that plays no role in this process. So let's start with reliability. What does reliability mean? Let's say you have a certain item and you want to know what is the weight of this item. Of course, there are now different possibilities. You could, for example, just guess it, or you could ask someone else. But of course, you can just put it on, for example, a scale. You can simply put it on a scale and then look at it. And you see probably, let's say, 312 grams. That's what you get out of it. And you say, okay, reliability now means when you measure it again with the same scale, you must get the same result. So when it's 312 gram, first attempt, second attempt, third attempt, that is a very high reliability because it gives the same result. Reliable means when you repeat the experiment, it gives you the same result. And of course, when you now say, hey, but during interviews, because you interview different people, you will never have exactly the same answer. Correct. This is why with interviews, you don't have 100% reliability. But when you ask 1,000 people, should we do A or B, and 997 say A and only 3 say B, you have a very high reliability that A is the better option. But reliability itself is only about, are you able to reproduce the result when you repeat the same experiment? It does not mean that this is the only factor you should consider. Factor number 2 is validity. And that's where it gets a bit more complex. Validity means how accurate are the results who claim to represent something that they actually represent what they claim? I know this sounds horribly complicated, but I can give you a very simple example to understand it. Let's say you take this item, you put it on a scale, 312 gram. You do it 10 times, 312 gram every single time. So you say high reliability, amazing. But then you find out it's 350 gram because no one ever calibrated the scale correctly. The same as when you take a thermometer. So when you, for example, want to say, how warm is it in this room? And you can, of course, say, well, I could just guess, but let's take a thermometer and then we will just check. So you say 21 degrees, 21 degrees, 21 degrees. It always gives the same result. However, it hasn't been calibrated properly. It's only 70 degrees centigrade in that room. You see, just getting the same result does not mean that you are automatically correct, because it has to not only be reliable, but also valid. I give you a very simple example from the real world. I could now claim 99% of all the people in your country claim that taxes are too high, and that is a representative number, because I asked more than 1,000 people. Taxes have to be lowered. And now you might be wondering, how is that possible that 99% of more than 1,000 people, which is representative, that they are all claiming taxes are too high? We have to find in schools and kindergartens and everything, public healthcare. How is that possible? Well, what I didn't tell you is I asked certain people. I asked people who were on board level, very high income in the 6-digit or even higher, and self-employed people. So when you only ask people of very high income and self-employed people, there's a high likelihood that you will get a confirmation that taxes are too high. And when you ask them again, so high reliability, you will claim, it says it is the result, because when I repeated it, I get the same result. But it is not valid, because when I want to talk about country says XYZ is an opinion, I must have a representative group that represents all the different groups that work and live in that country, and not just cherry pick the ones that will agree on my point of view anyway. So reliability and validity, always check both factors. And of course, now someone will say, but hey, what about experience? Isn't experience important? And yes, experience is important. So for example, let's say you work with a certain client and you mess something up. So you have to tell them, well, the goods you order, they will be delayed by 5 days. And what should we do? And then you say, well, according to our experience with the client, when we only tell them it's 5 days delay, they are very angry and they're not going to order with us next year. However, when we tell them it's a 5-day delay and you get a 10% coupon for your next order, then they are usually quite happy. And then you might say, we already tried with clients and telling them only it's later, and then 90% didn't order again. And as soon as we gave them a coupon, 85% ordered again within 2 months. So what you just said is not experience. Of course, it's experience according to what is colloquially said as we did something, we remember it, so we call it experience. But when we look at it, we are talking again about facts. It's a 5-day delay. That's a number. We can measure that. There's a new date, which is the date, a number. We can measure that. We give a 10% discount, which is a number in percent, and then a certain amount of money. We can measure that. And then we can measure and track the reorder, the amount and quota of reorders. So, of course, a certain experience gives you a feeling that suddenly your feeling and beliefs are better than the data, but it's not, because what you did is you maybe intuitively use data, but you call it experience because you don't want to sit there and say, okay, let's go down to the data. But well, this is what you should do. Even if you don't want to do it, data-driven decisions are better decisions. You only have to be careful that there might be one issue. There is a so-called Smith effect. And I don't mean this Mr. Smith effect. That's something different. Smart man in the house, the Smith effect, smart man in the house. So let's say you have a topic. No one has a clue about the topic. And suddenly someone steps in front of you, in front of the group. And this person has very little clue, but they have more than anyone else. The so-called Dunning-Kruger effect kicks in. As soon as you only have a very small piece of information and very little knowledge about something, often people with a lot of self-confidence portray themselves in a way that they are experts on the subject matter, while they are not, clearly not. Because what you now see is that suddenly they pretend they know everything about the topic, and because you know nothing, you trust them way too much. The Dunning-Kruger effect means you have such little amount of knowledge about the topic that you do not see how clueless in general you are, you do not see the amount of knowledge you do not have. And the Dunning-Kruger effect with the Smith effect, smart man in the house, is dangerous for decision making. So always look at the data. And of course, in addition to the Dunning-Kruger effect, we have unconscious biases. I give you an example. Let's say I give you one task. You are the leader of an opera house, and your job is to get the musicians together because you want to have not recorded, but live music. So, of course, you will now ask, what kind of play is it? Is it Mozart or Beethoven or whatever else is it? And then you will say, okay, we need musicians. We probably need flutes, and we need someone who's played the drums and someone who's going to play the violin. And so you make a list of people you need. And now we do the experiment in two different ways. And that has been done in the real world. Option one, you do the experiment, you do the hiring process where you sit behind a curtain and the other person does as well. So you only hear the audio. So you do the interview. You can hear each other talking very clearly. So you hear the talking and then they play music so you can evaluate their music, but you do not see them, because you will agree with me that when someone is sitting at an opera house and you hire them for the music, you don't hire them for the looks. You're not looking for models. You're looking for people who are excellent in playing music. So option number one is you do the whole hiring process with a curtain. Option number two is you do it without the curtain. So you, of course, talk. So you have the interview and you have the audio channel and you talk about everything. And of course, you hear their music, but now you also see them. And now you probably think, well, at the end of the day, we always focus on the result. So we want to hear their music. It will be the same result. And this cannot be further from the truth. Suddenly, as soon as people see each other, the results are completely different. And it's quite interesting which group has an advantage of that. So you will hire more male people, more white people, more straight people, so heterosexual people, more cisgender people, more people with the same elitist background when you have an elitist background, more people without the elitist background when you don't have an elitist background, more people who have commonalities with you. It is pretty much nothing else than a list of unconscious biases, confirmation bias, idiosyncratic bonus, etc. That's a different topic. But you need, and that is the core message here, you need, after you look at the data, you need to be aware of the Dunning-Kruger effect and unconscious biases. And how do you know unconscious biases? Because some managers still tell me, oh, I know someone who needs help with this, but I don't need that because I don't do these mistakes. Well, it's called unconscious bias because, drum roll, it's unconscious. You do not know that you have these biases until you get trained on these biases. And I can tell you from my own experience, and I get constant ongoing training and coaching on this, it is revealing and a true life changer to see how our decisions are not based on facts, but often on biases. So you have to go to the facts with valid and reliable data. You may add, if you want to, your experience, but at the end, it will be nothing else than adding some more data from your so-called experience. But of course, experience is important because you had more scenarios, you lived through more scenarios, which means you can offer more data. And the data has to be reliable and valid. Be aware, smart man in the house, the Dunning-Kruger effect, and unconscious biases, and get professional training on these biases. And of course, there's more to this. You, of course, now might think, well, I think we are pretty much based on beliefs. Can you help, or can I ask some questions? Yes, you can, of course. Just drop me an email, nb@nb-networks.com. If you have something very specific where you say, hey, we need training, coaching, consulting, mentoring, or we have project interim management aspects we need to talk about, or hey, we have an event, can you speak there, or can you host it? Yes, of course I can, but we can also just go through your questions. Looking forward to hearing from you. And thank you very much to everyone who in the last couple of weeks added to the discussion. Really, really great discussions. Thank you very much for that. And of course, there's more to that in writing. When you go to expert.nb-networks.com, I have a so-called leadership letter, a weekly publication. It's 100% content ad-free guarantee. When you go to expert.nb-networks.com, put your email address in there, and via that channel, you get free access to everything I publish. Every Wednesday morning, you receive an email, as I said, 100% content ad-free guarantee. But also, you only get it via that channel, because every week, meanwhile, I receive an email where people say, I found your content on that website. but they want me to pay for it. Exactly. Only when you go to expert.nb-networks.com, only there you get the free access every week, 100% content, ad-free guarantee. And now there's a big thank you. We have a new record. You probably now, when you follow me on social media, Facebook, Instagram, or on LinkedIn, you already have seen it. We broke a record with this podcast because last week we made it top 3 in Ireland. That's the highest ranking by far. The highest ranking so far we had was top 9. German's favorite word, 9. Okay, sorry. That was a cheap joke. So top 3 in Ireland. We made it to a ranking which I could not have thought of when I started this. 3 years ago now, I started this podcast, and it's always me, just some person sitting in front of their laptop recording this. No special tech, no advertising budget. I haven't spent a single penny on advertising or buying downloads or whatever else. It is truly unbelievable. So I cannot thank you enough for the time you spend with me here every single week again. Thank you very much for that. And of course, now after we talked about the first 2 important steps. So step number 1, drop me an email if you want to have a chat, nb@nb-networks.com. Step number 2, register for the leadership letter, expert.nb-networks.com. Thank you very much for the amazing ranking. We achieved here top 3 in Ireland. Thank you very much for that. And at the end of this podcast, it is important to say the most important step follows. And the most important step is to apply what you learned in this podcast, because only when you apply what you heard, you will see the positive change that you want to have in your organization, with your business, your company, or whatever entity you work for. I wish you all the best implementing these steps in your organizations. Always happy to help. Just drop me a line if you need some help. And at the end of this podcast, there's only one thing left for me to say. Thank you very much for your time.